HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Drone Age: How Drone Technology Will Change War and Peace by Michael J. Boyle. Read by Mike Lenz. Publisher's note: this audiobook refers to figures and tables included in the print and ebook editions of the book. 1. The Drone Age. On a late September morning in 2011, the Yemeni-American preacher Anwar al-Awlaki was finishing breakfast with a group of men in the Joff province of southwestern Yemen. This desolate region, once known for its fine Arabian horses and beautiful oases, was now a chaotic no-man's land, far outside of the control of the central government in Sana'a. For the last decade, the government of Ali Abdullah Saleh had struggled to restore order to the southern regions of the country amid a rising tide of tribal unrest and Islamic militancy. Like many other Islamists, Awlaki had retreated to the ungoverned spaces of the countryside because they provided free movement outside of the reach of Yemen's ruthless security services. He had good reasons to fear another run-in with them. Awlaki spent 18 months as a prisoner in Yemen's jails after being arrested without charge in 2006, and he knew that he would face a return to jail, or worse, if he were caught again. This breakfast meeting was not out of the ordinary for Awlaki, a leader in Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, an increasingly powerful offshoot of the terrorist organization started by Osama bin Laden. Since returning to Yemen in 2004, Awlaki had become the public face of this organization through his charismatic sermons, both in Arabic and in English, which criticized U.S. foreign policy and inspired people to join al-Qaeda's jihad. By 2009, he moved beyond inflammatory speeches and became operational, according to U.S. counterterrorism officials. He had been linked to a mass shooting at Fort Hood in November 2009 by a disaffected U.S. Army psychiatrist, Major Nidal Malik Hassan, as well as a plot by the young Nigerian Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib to destroy a Delta Airlines flight over Detroit weeks later on Christmas Day. In the U.S. media, he was being dubbed as the next bin Laden, even before Osama bin Laden was killed by a U.S. Navy SEAL team in May 2011. For the Obama administration, Awlaki posed a more vexing problem than bin Laden because he was a U.S. citizen. Born in Las Cruces, New Mexico, he spent several years as a child in the United States when his father, Nasser, was on a Fulbright scholarship. After living his teenage years in Yemen, he moved back to the United States to study civil engineering at Colorado State University in 1991. He was later active in mosques in Denver and San Diego and moved to Falls Church, Virginia, shortly before the September 11 attacks. Although the FBI investigated his links with the September 11 hijackers, they found nothing incriminating, but nevertheless continued to keep him under surveillance. For a brief time, Awlaki took on a public role as a spokesperson on interfaith tolerance. He was even invited to the Pentagon as part of an Islamic outreach program and to an interfaith prayer service at the U.S. Capitol. After he moved to London in 2002, his sermons became more strident in their criticism of U.S. foreign policy. He was jailed more than a year after his return to Yemen for unspecified charges, and only released due to family pressure on the Saleh government. By 2008, he was highly influential among jihadi groups around the world. His natural charisma and his ability to reach a global audience with his English-language sermons praising jihad against the United States made him a dangerous enemy. What concerned the CIA was his global reach. Awlaki's sermons were popular and widely quoted online, and his influence was evident in al-Qaeda's English-language magazine, Inspire. But he remained a U.S. citizen, with all of the constitutional protections that this status implied, and all U.S. government agencies were forbidden from conducting assassinations abroad under an executive order signed by President Gerald Ford in 1976. Even if that were not the case, a decision to assassinate al-Awlaki would hardly be expected from President Barack Obama. Obama had come into the presidency as a critic of the seemingly endless wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and wanted the United States to focus more on what he called nation-building at home. By training and temperament, he was skeptical about foreign policy outreach, particularly under the banner of the War on Terror. As an expert in constitutional law who had taught the subject at the University of Chicago, Obama knew well what due process rights a citizen like al-Awlaki would have in the United States, and that killing him could be a violation of federal law. He also knew it was morally problematic. Obama's thinking was shaped by scholars like Reinhold Niebuhr, who warned that evil was always present in the world and that a foreign policy committed to destroying every enemy abroad could be dangerous and even morally corrupting. Yet, Obama also recognized that, as president, he had an obligation to defend U.S. citizens from terrorist attacks, even when those attacks were orchestrated by one of their own. The specifics of the al-Awlaki case, that he was a member of a terrorist organization, not a recognized foreign army, and that he was living abroad in a country where the United States was not legally at war, would need to be swept aside in the face of that obligation. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes once remarked that lawyers spent a great deal of their time shoveling smoke to obscure issues that are well established within the law. To solve his al-Awlaki dilemma, President Obama turned to his own smoke shovelers in the Office of Legal Counsel, OLC, at the Department of Justice. They dutifully produced 2 memoranda that concluded that killing a citizen like al-Awlaki was permissible because he was participating in a war as part of al-Qaeda, and his activities could be considered an imminent threat. Notably, their analysis emphasized that killing al-Awlaki would constitute neither murder nor assassination, thus sidestepping the 2 actions that a U.S. president could never officially authorize. Instead, the Obama administration's lawyers embraced a legal gray area called targeted killing, which some influential legal scholars argued was permissible under conditions of armed conflict. According to this school of thought, targeted killings were different from murders because they were legal, and from assassinations because they were conducted against active combatants in a declared war. Meanwhile, the Pentagon and CIA ramped up their search for al-Awlaki, using satellites, intercepts of electronic communication, and local spies. The chief way that they hunted for him in the distant regions of Yemen was with unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, more commonly known as drones. The manhunt involved near-continuous coverage of Yemen by powerful Predator drones flown from U.S. bases in Djibouti and Saudi Arabia. In May 2011, only days after bin Laden's death, the Pentagon's Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, located al-Awlaki driving through the Shabwa province in the south of Yemen. With President Obama's approval, JSOC deployed manned Harrier jets, a Special Operations Dragon Spear aircraft, and Predator drones to kill al-Awlaki and his companions. Another drone, a massive surveillance aircraft called the Global Hawk, flew above the strike team and relayed a live video feed to JSOC commanders. This would be a drone strike which U.S. officials could watch in real time, giving instructions to the pilots as needed. Within hours of their launch, they found him. Using the Predator's laser guidance system, Harrier jets launched 3 Hellfire missiles against his convoy, but they missed. His Suzuki truck raced through the dust and smoke to evade the U.S. drones. He radioed for help from 2 sympathetic Yemeni brothers, Abdallah and Musaad Mubarak, both of whom were widely known in the AQAP community. Taking advantage of the confusion, Awlaki quickly switched cars with them, speeding away in their Suzuki truck toward safe haven in a nearby cave. The Mubarak brothers took off in the other direction, followed by U.S. drones, and were killed by the final series of missile strikes. Awlaki reported seeing a flash of light behind him and feeling a shockwave as his SUV sped away from the missile strike. Only later did it become clear to JSOC that Awlaki survived. For the rest of the summer, Awlaki lived as a hunted man. He knew his days were numbered. He warned his colleagues that the next set of missiles might be more accurate, reportedly saying that this time 11 missiles missed their target, but the next time the first rocket may hit. He became resigned to his fate, saying that no human being died until they reached their appointed time. He saw his upcoming death in religious terms, remarking that the tree of martyrdom in the Arabian Peninsula has already got ripe fruits on it, and the time for reaping has come. He moved around every few days for much of the summer, but eventually settled for a longer period in a mud house in Kashef, allegedly planning to make another video exhorting jihad. Only a few months later, on a bright September morning, Awlaki and 3 companions again heard the familiar whirring noise of a U.S. drone overheard and scrambled for their nearby jeeps to escape. But they were confronted not by one drone, but by 3, 2 Predator and a large Reaper model equipped with Hellfire missiles. For their second attempt to kill him, the Obama administration relied on drones to fire the missiles rather than manned aircraft. As the Predator drone affixed a laser target on the jeeps, the Reaper drone blasted a series of missiles at Awlaki and his companions, instantly killing them and burning their bodies beyond recognition. What was left of their bodies was later cut out of the jeep by local officials and given an Islamic funeral. Amid the burning wreckage, villagers found a traditional Yemeni rhinoceros horn dagger called a jambiyah, known to belong to Awlaki. Along with 2 Yemeni members of AQAP, another U.S. citizen, Samir Khan, a North Carolina-born jihadi responsible for al-Qaeda's English-language magazine Inspire, was also killed in the strike. In this drone strike, the Obama administration had killed 2 of its own citizens, one intentionally, one accidentally, in a country in which the U.S. government was not at war. Shortly after the strike, President Obama offered a carefully worded acknowledgement of the killing, noting that Awlaki was killed in Yemen and calling the successful strike a tribute to our intelligence community and to the efforts of Yemen and its security forces who have worked closely with the United States. He made no mention of Samir Khan, although Obama administration officials later described him as collateral damage. He also made no mention of drones, or of the crucial role that this technology played in enabling the deliberate killing of U.S. citizens on foreign soil. He did not tell the U.S. public that buried in a CIA archive was a strike video made in real time of the killing of Awlaki. The strike was immediately controversial, as civil liberties advocates demanded to know the legal rationale behind the president's decision to kill a U.S. citizen without trial or criminal charges. At the same time, drone technology itself remained widely popular with the U.S. public, despite the fact that its features, speed, precision, adaptability, and remoteness provided the essential foundation for President Obama's decision. What was sometimes overlooked in the debate that followed was that it was the rise of drone technology itself that had opened the door for a global expansion of targeted killing. While the policy decision was justly controversial, it was the technology that allowed President Obama to make life or death decisions about individuals in foreign lands from the quiet remove of the Oval Office. That technology, and now that capability to kill around the world, would be given to President Donald Trump and all those who held that office in the future. In this case, President Obama did not believe this was a difficult choice, calling the decision to kill Awlaki an easy one. But drones and their messy human consequences would continue to haunt him. In early September 2011, Anwar al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son, Abdul Rahman, went looking for his father in southern Yemen. Born in Denver and also a U.S. citizen, Abdul Rahman had not seen his father for 2 years, but he knew that Awlaki was on a kill list drawn up by the U.S. government. Abdul Rahman stayed with family and friends in Yemen and learned of the death of his father while there. 2 weeks later, he was spending the evening with friends in a cafe in Shabwa when a U.S. drone strike killed him and 5 of his friends. Abdul Rahman was not deliberately targeted and was not involved in militant activity. U.S. officials had received bad intelligence that suggested that an Egyptian al-Qaeda operative, Ibrahim al-Bana, was in that cafe and struck the site to eliminate him. Abdul Rahman and several of his cousins were killed instantly, with their shredded bodies left unrecognizable to their family. The U.S. government refused to comment on the case despite an ACLU lawsuit and anguished calls by Nasser al-Awlaki for the U.S. government to explain the deaths of his son and grandson. What are drones? How did President Obama go from being a skeptic about the use of force and mindful of his limits under the Constitution to authorizing the extrajudicial killing of a U.S. citizen on foreign soil? Is there something about drone technology that altered his choices or made his decision easier? The United States has long had the ability to see enemies around the world with satellites and to strike them with manned aircraft and precision-guided missiles. But only since the rise of drone technology has it done so on an almost daily basis. Equipped with what one former CIA director called an exquisite weapon, Obama wound up authorizing hundreds of targeted killings, including of U.S. citizens, during his time in office. Yet, even as this happened, he acknowledged that drones could affect his strategic choices and worried that they could be abused or misinterpreted as a cure-all for terrorism. To understand how drones might have influenced President Obama's strategic choices, it is important to begin by defining drones and identifying what makes them different. Drones are aircraft of varying size that do not have a pilot on board and are instead controlled by someone on the ground. Unlike missiles and other aerial projectiles, they are typically intended to be reused rather than simply rammed into a target. Most drones are not in and of themselves weapons, although they can be equipped to carry weapons of different sizes. While most people use the term drone broadly, the language around drones is controversial. Within the U.S. Air Force, for example, the terms drones and UAVs are generally rejected because they obscure the fact that all models are controlled by human beings, even if the pilot is not physically located in the vehicle itself. These terms can be seen to imply that drones are flying in an autonomous way, with relatively little control by a human on the ground. Although autonomous drones are on the horizon, this is not the reality today. The present generation of military drones is under direct human control, while the more sophisticated models, for example, the MQ-9 Reaper or RQ-4 Global Hawk, are no more automated than a commercial airliner. In fact, most large military drones are useless without a ground control station where pilots are located and a supply chain to ensure that the vehicle remains in the air. Because pilots are so essential, there is a vast bureaucratic infrastructure around the training and supervision of pilots during flight. For this reason, some have argued that drones are better described as remotely piloted aircraft, RPA, or unmanned aerial systems, UAS, as these terms emphasize the human control over the technology and the degree of control and oversight that they feature. Others have argued that retaining the term drone is important, because other formulations are not popular and too bland and bureaucratic to portray the reality of what drones do. Either way, it is important not to be too fixated on the term unmanned, as in reality it is the interaction between humans, the pilots, but also those supplying their operations on the ground and setting policy, and the technology, which determines what drones are capable of doing. This book will employ the term drone to follow popular use, but it is important to bear in mind that not all drones are alike. Among the key characteristics that most drones share is that 1. They are flown remotely, 2. They are capable of flight maneuvers, and 3. They are typically intended to be reused, unlike missiles and other disposable projectiles. But on many other criteria, range, endurance, speed, and ability to carry a payload, drones can vary so substantially that they hardly look like the same technology. The most famous drone, the now retired MQ-1 Predator, is closer to a military jet like an F-16 than to the small drones employed by hobbyists. The Predator model MQ-1B, for example, has a wingspan of 55 feet, carries 2,250 pounds of weight upon takeoff, and flies for 770 miles. Its larger cousin, the Reaper MQ-9, is similar, although it has a slightly longer range, 1,150 miles. These models can be flown by pilots located in ground control stations hundreds or even thousands of miles from the drone itself, and are linked by satellites to an intelligence infrastructure that enables their use. Compare this to the ordinary quadcopter drones employed by hobbyists and small companies for basic photography and delivery of goods. The popular Phantom 3 model drone, produced by the Chinese company DJI, has a weight of 2.64 pounds and can fly at 52.5 feet per second. At most, it can be flown 1.242 miles from the operator. The Phantom 3 has a sophisticated camera, but it cannot carry a significant payload and is small enough to be carried in its operator's hand. In general, drones like the Phantom 3 must remain within the line of sight of the operator and have a standard radio link to that person. In many respects, they are closer to a hobbyist's model airplane than to an F-16 or any other type of manned aircraft. The term drone encompasses all of these models. To date, the public debate has largely focused on the Predator and Reaper drones, due to their prominence in the targeted killing program, but has paid comparatively less attention to the rapid diffusion of small quadcopter drones in other areas of life. There have been a number of attempts to classify drones, but a classification scale originally produced by the U.S. Air Force focused on two general characteristics of drones: their altitude and endurance. In broad terms, some models are capable of only low altitude, such as several hundred feet in the air, while others can fly at the same height as commercial aircraft, approximately 30,000 feet. Some military surveillance drones can fly at even higher altitudes, such as 60,000 feet. The endurance for each model also varies substantially, with some small hobbyist drones capable of flying only a few hours, and other military models capable of remaining in air for more than a day. Table 1.1, drawn from that classification scheme, identifies the 5 tiers of drones and provides some examples of each. Aside from the differences in the altitude and endurance of these drones, their functions vary across the different tiers. Drones have 2 distinct functions. 1. The collection and recording of images and data from the external environment. And 2. The delivery of payloads, ranging from food, medicine, and commercial packages to missiles. Some drones are capable of both, while others can do only one. Most small drones are equipped to collect images and scientific data and can be used for a wide range of development activities, such as monitoring crops and environmental damage. They can also be used for reconnaissance on the battlefield. Today, commercial retailers like Amazon are working on building small drones that are capable of delivering parcels and other commercial packages. But this effort remains a work in progress. Multi-purpose, medium-altitude, long-endurance, MALE drones, like the Predator and Reaper models, can be used for both intelligence collection and delivery, as evidenced by their role in delivering the missiles that killed al-Awlaki. The high-altitude, long-endurance, HALE drones, such as the Global Hawk RQ-4, are generally used for sophisticated collection tasks, such as advanced imagery surveillance, and they involve technology not widely available on the commercial market. Both collection and delivery models can be used for peaceful purposes, such as surveillance, scientific research, and commerce, and for military purposes, such as reconnaissance and targeted killing. In the debate over their use, it is important to keep in mind the diversity of models and functions of drones, as those most widely discussed types and missions, the Predators and Reapers used for targeted killing, are hardly typical. It is equally important to recognize what is new and what is not about drones. Many of the most widely discussed characteristics of drone technology, for example, the distance between the operator of the weapon and the target, and the depersonalized nature of the violence itself, have arisen before with other military innovations, such as artillery, aerial bombardment, and nuclear weapons. Drones are slower than most forms of manned aircraft and can be less precise than a cruise missile. They are no more automatic or dependent on computers than commercial airliners. Drones can see things on the ground just as satellites can, but not necessarily at a higher level of detail. Drones are less adaptable and nimble than manned aircraft, and at present, many military drones, such as the Reaper or Global Hawk, are less likely than a manned aircraft to evade enemy fire. What makes drones different is that they combine characteristics seen elsewhere into a single technology that can be deployed at low cost. It is the amalgamation of these characteristics in a single technology that makes drones distinctive. They combine the speed and precision of a cruise missile with the durability and responsiveness of a manned aircraft. They convey images that are strikingly real and accurate, like a digital camera or a satellite, but are neither as small as cameras nor as removed from their subject as satellites. By combining features like speed, precision, adaptability, and remoteness into a single technology, drones become what is sometimes known as a disruptive technology and alter the strategic choices of those that have them. The drone age. It is hard to overstate the speed with which drone technology has emerged as a force in global politics over the last 20 years. The concept of a remotely piloted aircraft has long been a dream for militaries and aviation enthusiasts. But the technology was difficult to develop, and early prototypes failed more often than they succeeded. As late as 2000, the U.S. military had only a handful of drones, most of which were seen as unreliable. By 2014, the total U.S. military inventory had increased to over 10,000 drones. Inside the military, the demand for drone overflights is insatiable. In August 2015, the Pentagon announced plans to increase drone overflights in conflict zones by 50% by 2019. In December 2015, the U.S. Air Force unveiled a plan to double the number of drone pilots. But even that may not be enough to meet demand. Other countries are following the lead of the United States in embracing drone technology. The United Kingdom, for example, announced that at least one-third of the Royal Air Force, RAF fleet will be drones by 2030. According to the Pentagon, China plans.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?